to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are more chairs up front once you sign in. If people would like to join us a little closer. All right. Mr. Swanson, in respect to your comment from earlier, this is a joint public meeting with the Board of Selectmen posted as such. So we will conduct the meeting from up here.
A joint public meeting
Yes.
posted by the Board of Selectmen.
Yes.
Does that mean that the Board of Selectmen can take actions tonight?
It's a posted meeting, so I would assume the next one, yes.
So the answer is yes. So if you were asked to rescind this at the end of this discussion, you would have that opportunity tonight.
If so, but I think the intention of the Board of Selectmen is to not take any action, but we do have the right to exercise that decision. But I think right now we just want to listen, which I think is appropriate.
Yeah, you should have listened before you took your action, David. That's the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Moulton. I'm the chairman of the Board of Selectmen in Southampton, and we're here tonight at the request of residents, boards, committees, commissions, and departments alike to discuss the prospect of working with the City of Holyoke to create an intermunicipal agreement for our building department. At the end of July, this board asked Holyoke to present a draft proposal for joint services for our building department that included a building inspector, plumbing and gas inspection services, and electrical inspection services. In early August, this board was visited by concerned residents and received from various town departments voicing concerns over this possible agreement. At that time, the Board of Selectmen arranged a joint meeting for all groups who are stakeholders in this matter and for the public to voice their concern. We now have the most recent draft of the intermunicipal agreement as proposed by Holyoke. This proposal calls for the cost totaling $70,440.66 for the following services: local building inspector, oversight by the Holyoke Building Commissioner and Holyoke Assistant Building Commissioner, transportation costs and all possible fringe benefits at the maximum possible cost to the town. For the same range of services, minus oversight of the building commissioner and the assistant commissioner, the town of Southampton would be spending approximately $71,680.20. The difference is $1,239.54 in savings. I just add that there's 5 seats up front in case anybody needs another chair. With regards to inspectional services for plumbing and gas and electrical service, the proposal calls for $40 per inspection. The current rate of pay that the town pays its inspectors is 80% per inspection, collecting 20% per inspection for revenue. Reinspection yields 100% for inspectors and 0% revenue. In fiscal 15, the electrical inspector has conducted approximately 25 inspections with a take-home pay of $2,520 and a revenue for the town of $270. If Holyoke's proposal had been in place since July 1st, the inspector pay would have been $1,000 with a revenue for the town of $1,790, a difference of $1,520 in revenue. In fiscal 15, the plumbing and gas inspector has conducted approximately 42 inspections with a take-home pay of $3,444 and a revenue for the town of $497. If Holyoke's proposal had been in place since July 1st, the inspector pay would have been $1,680 with a revenue for the town of $2,261, a difference of $1,764 in revenue. Tonight we have with us John Lumbra, the treasurer for the City of Holyoke, and Kevin Lagimonier, thanks, Assistant Building Commissioner for the City of Holyoke. The purpose of this meeting is to hear the concerns from the town departments and the residents of Southampton. Before getting started, I'd like to welcome all those in attendance and welcome Mr. Lumbra and Mr. Lagimonier. I can't say it. Lagimonier. Get it. We would like to provide everyone who would like to speak with the opportunity to do so. We have a microphone on the side, and I see that the room is kind of full, so I was hoping we were going to make a line and speak, but maybe that won't work. So when you're called to speak, please come up to the microphone, provide your name and your address, and present your concerns. We will begin with the town officials first, boards and commissions. And to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to speak, we'll be using a time limit of 2 minutes per speaker, and we'll be asking that the information only be provided once. Please only provide new information when it's your turn. Once an individual has spoken, the individual group that was addressed will have the opportunity to respond. If we have additional time after that and you would like to speak again, we're welcome to that opportunity. We'll take a 15-minute recess at 7:30 and return at 7:45, and we will conclude our meeting at 9 o'clock. The Board of Selectmen does not have any intent to make a decision on this matter this evening, but we will revisit at our next meeting on October 7th at 6:30. I think there's a lot to hear tonight, and we are open to all of that, and to make a hasty decision, again, would not benefit anybody. So with that being said, I guess I would open the floor to any public boards or commissions that would like to start with their concerns.
I don't mind getting things started.
I would also ask that we try and keep the side conversations down, because it's hard enough for the public to hear at home. So please speak loudly and try and control yourselves.
Gary Swanson, speaking both as an assessor for the town and as a citizen, somewhat concerned over what appears to be somewhat of a gutting of town services that we have enjoyed and we've had for quite a long time here, and this has become somewhat of a shock to most of the people in this room, I have to believe, that the town has, or that the Board of Selectmen, which is supposed to be acting in the best interest of the town, which is what you took an oath and a pledge to do, that you on July 29, I believe it was, took an action to join in a regional effort with the city of Holyoke without having consulted with any of the financial officials, your town treasurer collector, your town accountant, the Board of Assessors, and particularly the stakeholders. There are many stakeholders who are affected by this decision who are simply blindsided by the action that you took in July. That being said, after most of the boards and many of the stakeholders had an opportunity to see what was happening here, your financial people, to start with, as an assessor, the Board of Assessors. I'll complete this, David. The Board of Assessors took a position that you need to understand that not only has your treasurer collector, your accountant told you that this is a false economy, but in addition to that, the assessors...
Over 2 minutes.
He has my 2 minutes.
Thank you. The assessors on August 17 wrote a letter to this board explaining that there is what we certainly hope is an unintended consequence, and we haven't seen a response from this board to our letter, but basically you have to understand that above the Prop 2.5 tax ceiling, there is only one other source of tax revenue available to the town, and that is what we refer to as new growth. To get new growth assessments, the Board of Assessors relies very heavily upon the in-house inspection services that are provided by our town, our building inspector, plumbing inspector, electrical, and so forth. And as long as we have these services readily available, people are also more inclined, the guy that wants to put a deck on the back of his house, he's going to be more inclined to take out a building permit, but if he's got to run off to Holyoke to do it, or if it's not convenient for him, or if he or she decides that, gee, maybe I can get away with something and I don't have to sign up for this, then we've lost that additional tax assessment, we've lost that additional revenue. And it is the opinion of the entire Board of Assessors that the town is going to lose revenue as a result of taking this service outside of the town and not employing it, directly and having it in-house. And frankly, also, as former chairman of the building committee, we built offices for certain services that we expected to have, that we expected to be used here. And I'll wrap it up now, but I think what's happened, to summarize, is that we've all, the town departments, the stakeholders, the builders, the people who depend on this service, we've all been blindsided, and this board really needed to listen to what these people had to say and to understand the financial and other consequences before taking this kind of abrupt and precipitous action. And that's really all I've got to say at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Boyd.
Well, actually, there's a department, you were coming from Board of Health.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were getting out for. Yep. I'll stick to the 2 minutes.
Thanks, Lisa.
And I'm going to just give you a bullet point items, and if you don't mind, I'll stand. I think everybody can hear me. Lisa Broder McGann, I'm the chair of the Board of Health. I'm also a resident of Southampton. I've been in the chair position for about 2.5 years. I speak on behalf of my board when I say, and I can concur with Mr. Swanson, that our board was blindsided by this action. I had to hear from some third party that the Board of Selectmen had voted to outsource various things. That's of significant concern. I'm going to give you 6 bullet point reasons why it's of significant concern and the types of things we're worried about that we'd like the Board of Selectmen to consider. The first one is that the building inspector and the inspector's position is important public safety. It's as important as our police department, and I don't think that we'd be thinking about outsourcing that. I think it's an important sense of community that we have people that are from within looking at our homes, the safety of our homes, whether it be the electric or the plumbing. That's the first bullet point. The second is, I can say that we have had a great difficulty retaining and attracting employees. And I can say the turnover in my office has been horrific, and I have lost a clerk, I think because of this, discussed collaboration, because the Board of Health and the Board of Inspection, they share a clerk. Okay, so when you decided to outsource, my clerk says, has my job gone? Is it not gone? I don't know. It's a concern. We're going to have problems attracting and retaining people if we're outsourcing. My third point is collaboration. Our board spent a great deal of time collaborating with Mr. Sears, and the plumbing inspector and the board of the building inspector to come up with routines so that we are in sync with one another. And now we're going to outsource? That's just, I don't even want to go down that road. The fourth thing is the employees. We have existing people who have served this town predominantly not for profit, and with the brush of the hand of the Board of Selectmen without notice to them, their jobs are outsourced. I think that's problematic for me as a citizen, and again, going back to my other point of retaining employees. Once we lose these people, they're not going to want to come back. Fifth concern, legality. I've served for 25 years as municipal special attorneys for various towns. And what I'm concerned about is just the unintended exposure that we have about writing. We have a statute called 258. I have all kinds of concerns over who's liable in the event if somebody acts in town. Are we going to be immune under 258, et cetera? So I'm concerned about legality. And the last concern, and I'm not sure if I counted right, was overall savings. I'm not convinced that we're going to be saving any money. And I think if the board had done this simply for saving money, perhaps we can go back to the people who are doing these jobs and see if there's another way we can put their heads together with ours to look at the savings that we have. Maybe we can make it up by just opening up a conversation with them, which is something I asked the board to do before they take the vote. Thank you.
Are there any other spokespeople for boards or commissions in town that would like the floor?
Ryan Gielaher, Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm not going to sit up here and beat a dead horse. I think she hit a lot of the highlights of the importance. And I just want to reinstate that the blindsided, we worked with Richard at the time as a building inspector, as also the zoning enforcement officer, hand in hand and very close. And one of my concerns of many is the hours that Richard was accessible when phone calls, emails, things were transpired. Now, like everyone else, I work during the day. Sometimes I could talk to Richard during the day. Sometimes it was 6:15 in the morning. Sometimes it was 9 o'clock at night. And that's a concern with the zoning board, as we're all volunteers, is when we're accessible to be able to have, Richard would call me, hey, we got this going on. Richard, I can't talk about it right now. Can I call you back? And how, I'm a little concerned if we're doing something that's cookie cutter and it's going to be set hours, 30 or 35 hours a week, that's fine. 9 to 5, I can't always have those conversations. Maybe other board members can, but being the chair, I took the brunt of the majority of that. So, it's just the logistics is a big concern. And secondly, I was blindsided. I heard about it from third-party information, and was completely taken by surprise and reached out to another board member on the planning board and had no idea about it either. So I was kind of shocked that I figured if you were thinking about it, doing it, not necessarily you have to reach out to us, but I thought it would have been courteous and informative, seeing as how we work pretty close with the building inspector, the zoning enforcement officer. I think that's all I have at this time.
Thanks, Ryan.
Go ahead, John.
Would you mind going to the microphone?
Come on, John.
Be recorded here anyways. Don't forget to smile to take your picture.
Okay, well, good evening. My name is John Furman. I'm the chairman of the planning board, and there's 4 members of the planning board here tonight. And I apologize, I stepped in a little bit late from a work commitment, so I didn't think there was a few speakers ahead of me, but I caught the end of what Ryan had said. In general, the same sentiment as far as the hours and kind of not being informed. One of the biggest issues that we have is that we get I personally get calls on how the building permit process is supposed to work. And up until this point, I've been able to say, you have to go here, you have to go here, you have to go here. The information that was given to the boards, which we got through a local builder and a resident, is not very clear. It doesn't have a concise diagram that shows where people have to go. And I guess that's okay. We didn't have one before. But the problem is that, you could just go to the corner office and then your flow chart started and ended there, and he would tell you where to go. Now that we're bringing in another community, it's a little different. That coordination effort isn't there. And no disrespect at all to the professional staff of Holyoke. I am personally concerned with how an official will be vested in this community when they're not part of this community. I know that we have zoning laws that we have to abide by. I've been on the planning board for, I think, 8 years. There's always something in the zoning code that I am finding, as well as my other members. Not only does the board have to understand their code, which I'm sure they know very well, now they've got to get vested in our code. And I just don't see that being effective. I think we have to have someone here who knows where to go, what the answers are, and how to direct our citizens. I think our citizens deserve to have somebody here. So I don't know if any of the other members want to speak as far as the planning board goes, but we had written correspondence that kind of outlined 3 areas. Ryan had already talked about 2. I won't bother going through those 2, but the other one is just, you know, the vestment. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there's no other boards or commissions that would like to speak, I would open it up. I guess we can start with Mr. Boyle.
Hi, my name is Jim Boyle, 96 Gun Road. I'd just like to start. Basically, I was here the night of the meeting that took place where the vote was taken. And at that point, it looked like it was the end of the road for any job applicants at that point. It looked like there was nobody available. After the spiel from the Holyoke treasurer on this, and it was very short, the board took a vote and voted to do it. So needless to say, that just, when that happened, it effectively fired the plumbing inspector.
John, Mr. Boyle, I'm sorry, we didn't vote to actually do that. We actually voted to look at it.
Well, that's not the way I heard it.
I thought we were still sort of looking at it. We didn't vote to actually do it.
Well, I'm not.
Maybe I misunderstood.
Well, I think if we read back into that, I was under the impression that it was done, the vote was done to move on with this project.
There's a discussion, I thought.
Well, no, I don't believe it was a discussion. Maybe that could get clarified, but,
Maybe we could just.
yeah. Well,
Mr. Boyle, go ahead. I would like to hear.
okay, so needless to say, when you took that vote, you effectively fired the wiring inspector and the plumbing and gas inspector at that time. But needless to say, they're still with you. They stayed with you through this process. They're still here. Even to today, Rich, the retired building inspector, came in to take the place of Paul Healy, which at that point you thought was all through. So this looked like an emergency vote. Let's get Holyoke on board. Dave, you made the remark at that point, if you look back in the minutes, that when can you be on board? That's kind of the word you said. And they said to you, we're going to be at the city council next Tuesday, we'll get the vote, and possibly we could be with you at the end of the week. Boom, the vote went.
Well, that's my trying to understand what the timeline is going to be like, to be honest with you. And I still, Mr. Boyle, I still don't think we voted to do that, but maybe I missed.
Well, that's okay. But
Misremembering how it went.
anyway, as the discussion went on the financial matter of this, I know that letters came in from the accountant after the fact. They were never put on board of this thing going forward. But Holyoke, City Council put it on their last agenda meeting. They sent it down into their finance committee. I don't believe it's out yet. It wasn't on the agenda tonight. So they took the initiative to look at the financial part of it. It's not a done deal yet. The thing that bothers me the most is I heard financial figures tonight. I'm not sure where they came from. Did they come from our account or did they come from the Holyoke account?
They come from ours. They came
Okay.
from the town of
So
Southampton.
that's where it is. But there is other figures in there that come into play. But needless to say, that's all I got to say. Your people, your wiring inspector, your plumbing inspector, your old building inspector are still with you today. And even though they figure they could be losing their job, not that they need it, but they did stand by you. So what I'm asking you to do is take a close look at this, rescind that vote no matter how you did it, and move on the way we do it. I've been doing business in town since 1970, and I never had a deal with another town as far as it went. So that's the way I feel about it, so I guess that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot of people here, so I would think that someone else might have something else they'd like to share.
If you don't have anything else, I have a question.
Sure, would you mind?
So I'm Tiffany Labrie, a Southampton resident, 42 Coleman Road. I'm also a member of the planning board, but the comments from the planning board were represented by Mr. Furman as well as in our letter. I just had a question as a resident, and I was just wondering if, whenever is appropriate, if the select board or the officials from the city of Holyoke could comment on what the motivation is for the city of Holyoke for entering into this intermunicipal agreement. You know, if there are benefits to the city of Holyoke that have motivated them to reach out to the town to ask for this intermunicipal agreement.
So I guess I can speak to one of the conversations that happened was when we were thinking about this regionalization as a whole, we wanted to know if anyone in the area was open to that idea. And as far as I know, no one else has reached out to us other than Holyoke. As far as the motivation goes, that I'm not sure, and I would turn that over to the officials from Holyoke. But as far as we are concerned, it truly is, you know, where can we save money, and is this cost effective?
So I think as far as, and my understanding of what happened at the previous meeting was that the vote was just to move forward to allow the city to draft some sort of agreement, which is available tonight, to send back. I mean, it's before any of this implements, at least on the city side, we still have to go through the whole city council version of it. And we're at the point where our council has looked at it and blessed the agreement. It's in finance. They will meet at some point, discuss it, and bring it back out, and the full body will have to vote on it before the city can move forward with it. It's a town versus a city, so the town still has its own process that you need your legal counsel to agree to this whole matter and report back to your board, and there does need to be additional votes made. So nothing could happen tomorrow, at least from the city's point of view, without additional votes taking place. As far as motivation, we were asked if we were willing to provide this service. We took it as, and I guess a little background story, at the same time, we're discussing whether or not the city of Holyoke is extremely interested in regionalizing our dispatching, and whether we keep dispatching in the city of Holyoke or dispatching goes somewhere within Hampshire or Hampden County, and that services our area. And that was part of the quid pro quo for us, is we'll help you out with this. We're really looking to consolidate our dispatching and do something else with that, which is part two of what happened that night with the meeting. We did take the advice of the Board of Selectmen here, and we did reach out to all the surrounding communities about building and codes. None of the communities came back that they wanted to do that. However, Southwick, Westfield, Montgomery, Chicopee, Holyoke, Southampton are all at the table discussing regional dispatching. And you have all your fire chiefs and police chiefs in those communities doing it. And this correlates to DLT funds coming out of PVPC along with CIC. But the benefit to the city of Holyoke is that we would build by agreeing to house this person. Currently when Southampton, and somebody mentioned Paul Healy's name, who's the former building commissioner of Holyoke, and when he was building commissioner of Holyoke, he would cover for Rich when he was not available. So there's already some institutional knowledge. Kevin came on board with Paul. Did you start with Paul?
Yeah.
And then it has been consistent through there with Damien being in there now. But our thought process is that we already have a building commissioner. We have Kevin as the assistant, and then our inspectors. This would just enhance our service. We're incorporating Southampton at the request of Southampton to consider taking on Southampton. The cost of doing that is X. It's the salary, it's the pension, it's the FICA, it's the benefits, whatever they pick, and the mileage. That's the proposal we sent back. If it is beneficial to Southampton, Holyoke's not going to take a loss on it. I can say that with safe assurity. But we were asked to present an offer. This is how we would provide this service if we did do it. We presented multiple options, just the building commissioner to oversee it in name only, so you could lower the threshold, and therefore perhaps the compensation level that was being offered would attract an individual versus trying to attract a fully licensed building commissioner at a lower compensation than the area pays. To the whole gamut. And my recollection is ultimately the board voted to explore the whole gamut and report back, which is the draft agreement that came back tonight. If that answers your
Does
question.
that answer your question?
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, please.
Would we be able to get a copy of the draft agreement as well as the numbers that you read today?
It's public.
There were copies of the draft agreement in the back of the room. However, if you didn't get one, we can get you one.
Thanks.
Financial question, follow-up. Is Holyoke applying for a Community Innovation Challenge grant on this? Have you looked at that?
Yes, we have looked at that. That's available up to $500,000. The application is due by October 4th. You need to have a shovel-ready project. If this agreement continues to follow favorably, then it would qualify for a shovel-ready project, and we could apply for the funds. Again, the deadline's October 4th, so that's this Friday. I believe the intent is Holyoke wouldn't necessarily apply for it, although we would have to agree to it. And in that particular case, only the mayor's office needs to agree to it. The mayor's chief of staff is here, and he can report back to the mayor. But it would, more than likely, it should be applied under the name of Southampton, and Southampton be reimbursed for 100% of the expenses for the first year.
Has Southampton looked at, it's October 10, by the way.
Is it the 10th? Or the 10th, sorry.
We've already spoken, myself and John, about CIC funds. I've also spoken with Josh Garcia from PVPC. I've already done CIC training. Josh would actually help us even with the CIC grant if we need him to, and we'd be more than willing to put it together. The training information generally provides that they lean towards the granting of this when it's a unique project, something that hasn't already been, the path hasn't already been gone down by anyone else in the state, and this, I believe, is a unique one that no one else has done yet. The other thing is that they generally look at plans that are ready to go, they're shovel-ready, and the fact that we already have a municipal agreement, intermunicipal agreement ready to go. That's another thing. The other part, I don't know if John mentioned this or not because I was out in the hall, but the fact that we would have already theoretically started this project prior to receiving the funds in March shows that we're invested to it. So that gives them more reason to invest in it. Other things is, in addition to actually supporting the program for an entire year, actually it's 10 months that they provide funding for, but sometimes you can get it out for a whole year depending on how it's written, is they actually provide up to $5,000 in capital expenses that you can apply for. So if there's any equipment that we would need for a joint staff, we could apply for it in that, whether it's computers, whether it's software, whether, some people even go for such things as a car, so that we would have a vehicle for inspections. These are things we do not currently have. These are things we could not afford on our own. These are things we do not have capital expenses to do. But these are things that the state is willing to invest in if we were able to get the CIC funds. There's also other grants out there, more and more, from state and federal that support regionalization and intermunicipal agreements, and when there is communities working together, there's generally more funds out there. That is something that they are looking to support at this time. Did I answer the question, Mr. Swanson?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you make it to California, by the way?
Yes, I did.
Did you have a good time?
We had a great time. Great to be back to work. Richard Olexak, previous building inspector, currently acting as building inspector in Southampton. I've had this job for 10 years. I think I've done a pretty good job. A couple years ago, I worked in Holyoke also. Before Kevin was there, before John was there, I worked with Paul Healy. I think Holyoke has their own problems. I don't think this is under their umbrella to take over Southampton because they've got their own worries in Holyoke, not in Southampton. I've done a good job here. I think people can say that I was on time for inspections. Probably a little quicker than most people, but We got things done and people are happy with it. And I don't think it's a big thing about money in this town. I think it's people want the service. It's a small town, and that's what we're here for, service. I think if somebody can put together a package and bring in another inspector, I'll work with them as the acting commissioner until they pass all their tests. I don't have a problem with that. It's a part-time employee. I'm here to help the town. I've done it for 10 years. I can still keep doing it. I hope they'll take that into consideration before you give the town away. Thank you.
Patrick Nelf. I work and run Richard's Fuel and Heating in Easthampton. We do a lot of heating systems, plumbing work in this town. And in Holyoke, we do some work. And one thing I've always found when you call Holyoke, and you need to think about this, excuse me, he's always too busy to get to you right away. He puts you on a list. It's not good. I'm not going to degrade the guy, but I can't imagine bringing him and having him do Southampton's work too. It'll only be a little bit of time before, hey, it's going to cost us more money because we have to hire more inspectors, and we're going to be right where we are now. So really, keep it in-house, keep it small. That's what this town is all about. Thank you.
Patrick, can I ask you a question? You do know that there would be someone hired just for Southampton?
So they're going to hire an inspector just for
Southampton.
Yes.
What are the other problems that you've had with Holyoke?
Well, it's a timing thing. When you call them, like I call Tom and say, you know, we schedule the work, we have the permits, and we call Tom and say, we're doing a gas boiler, we're doing a conversion. You call him in the morning, and at the end of the day, he does the inspection so the gas can get turned on the next day. We did a job in Holyoke, the customer waited a week.
Okay.
And that's Holyoke to
But
Holyoke.
besides the timing, is there a communication issue or getting a proper
No,
phone check?
it's just the way they work.
So-
And this town is used to, and you can talk to the other building people in this town, and plumbers, when you make a phone call to any of them, I mean, talk to an electrician, you call, you know,
But again,
it
Mr. No,
works.
we will have somebody in town that's not like somebody working.
So we're gonna call somebody in town, I'm gonna call the town office here, and they're gonna answer the phone and send out our inspector.
Right.
So what are we gaining by getting Holyoke involved?
I think, just a quick, I think you're specifically talking about a plumbing and gas inspector,
Well, I mean, that's what I
right?
deal with.
So your inspector assigned here, or assistant commissioner, wouldn't necessarily be the licensed, because right now he's not, you have 3 people. Right? You have a plumbing and gas inspector, and an electrical inspector, and then you have the commissioner, or the assistant commissioner. So you're specifically talking about the gas and electric,
Well, that's what I deal with.
right. Yeah. Just so the person that's stationed here in Southampton full-time wouldn't necessarily be qualified or able to do that.
So what would,
Most communities are not.
what would be the turnaround for, say, if Patrick needed a gas inspector, they would be calling over to Holyoke to have that gas inspector from Holyoke to come here?
So for the,
George would be coming here.
well, I don't believe so. Now Damien is, the building commissioner is not here, Kevin is, but I believe the initial plan will to be used the Holyoke alternates.
And have you worked with the Holyoke alternate?
It's been, well, I mean, I can see where it's gonna go. You're gonna have a list of people, yeah, okay, so, you know, it's gonna be on a list.
And we provided the names of the alternates in the original proposal, so you know who those employees are.
But you've never worked with the alternates, Patrick?
Every now and then they show up for inspection. for
Are they timely,
situations.
are they timely in their presentation?
Yeah, again, but we're wait, it isn't like this community where you can make a phone call, you know, and get stuff done, you call down, and, you know, you make an appointment.
Right.
So,
Any other issues that you've had with working with Holyoke?
I'm not gonna go into details here, but, no, I mean, but I just think keeping, it just, once you start to we've done this, I mean, we've talked about regionalizing all these things, and we also, why don't we regionalize our fire department? Why do we need a full-time fire department or full-time guys? Why don't we have Holyoke, standby for us, right over the mountain?
Well, we talked about that. I've talked about dividing the town into thirds and have Easthampton, Westfield, and Holyoke divide the town. And people talk about the state police taking over the police and.
Right, but that's what you guys did. So,
Hold on one second. Sir, you had your hand up. Would you like, yes?
name is Bob Cannon, own Cannon Real Estate. I hear everybody talking about money, and I talk about everything but what really counts. When people buy a house, they're tremendously invested. There's a lot of emotion. Timing is super important. Being a contractor, somebody should try it for a while and find out what it's like. Those guys are, that job has become unbelievably rigid and tough. They rely on people that they know. The people who supply the services in this town do a fantastic job because they know them. And the people who buy a house in here, don't forget, they're going to live here. You have to live with them. And the impersonal nature of having a town outside of where they live do the inspections, they might do a great job, but there's no way they're going to do the job that the people that are here do as it is. And being late for closing, I can tell you within the last month, I had 2 buyers cry. I had a guy have a stroke because of the stress of the regulations on buying and selling a home. And it's important to remember that you're supposed to supply a service that does the job for the people who are going to live here. And how can you best supply that? By having local people who do the inspections and are going to live with these people who move into town. And no offense against Holyoke people, they're not going to live with the people that move here. So I hope that you consider that when you make your decision. Yeah.
Yes, sir? Yes, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Soto. I'm a Holyoke City Councilor. I have many friends and family that live here in Southampton. That's why I'm here tonight. I assure you, you do not want our department overseeing your city, your town. We have enough issues, and we can't control what goes on in our own department. I concur with the gentleman here. I've had calls from constituents who've waited a week during the winter time to have their gas put on for heat. That's unacceptable. I encourage the selectwoman here, do the right thing, keep things as the way they are. I can see the regional approach is coming in the future, but I assure you, you do not want Holyoke Building Department overseeing any of your services here. Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Soto, we have a question.
Sure. How many members on the city council?
There's 15 of us.
15.
And we're not happy about doing this.
Okay. Do you know that your building department was supervising our building department at times?
No.
You aware of that?
Nope.
There are times that we didn't have all the licenses that we needed in town, and Holyoke had to step up to the plate in the past.
We do nice things for
When was this? Not since I've been in town, 36 years.
I do remember at one point, one of the building inspectors was having trouble passing a test.
Yes, but it wasn't Holyoke. It was my work from Easthampton that came in here.
My mistake, I
He covered up
apologize.
for 30 days.
Ms. Cohen?
That's a hard act to follow, but
You should see it when they're all together, when all 15 are in the same room.
I mainly came here with questions. However, I have to support everybody's comments about keeping the services in town. Nelda Cohen. I'm a resident, I'm also on the zoning board. I keep hearing that the motivating reason is financial. Has the select board looked or had a financial analysis done?
Can I answer you?
Sure.
Okay, so I had asked for some information to be given to me, and so I have it here. And in the least amount of words possible, the total savings to the town when you group all of this together is only about $1,200. However, The revenue that the town receives is upwards of $20,000. So that is a motivating factor in my decision-making. I mean, the cost savings is not much, but when you're receiving revenue, it's something that you need to give consideration to.
Okay, I'm glad Beck is here because she could probably answer this. There are three tiers to my consideration. Financial analysis, the operational considerations. Have you looked at how the town operates and how it would benefit by the relationship with Holyoke or not? And the other thing is the net revenue. We have asked at several meetings, what did the building inspector net, whether there was a loss or a gain in 2013 and 2014. Does anybody have that?
I can tell you the game,
In what year?
both years.
Well, according to the expense report that was issued, I'm looking at the June 30th, 2014. Okay. There were expenses of $77,000, and there was revenue of $41,936. The projected revenue for permits were $55,000, and they were under by $13,000.
What year
So,
was it, Nova?
2014.
Completely wrong.
Okay, all right. So, do you have those reports? Can you verify? Because these are important numbers when we're being told that we have to do this primarily because of financial reasons.
So currently, well, would be the end of the year, and I'm still closing the books. Let's see what I have here. I got new glasses.
Take a chair.
So, in 2014, at the end of the year, the building permits that we collected were $75,811.35.
What year was that?
2014.
Well, what was this report then? 6/28/2014. It was 41.9. Did you put money back in there from?
If this was 6/28, there might have been.
That's
This
a
was
lot.
run on
That's a big
7/1.
difference
Yes.
from 2 days from the report.
Because the treasurer would have posted those receipts after,
Okay.
they came up until June 30th. So it's $20,811 and some change over what we actually budgeted from FY14.
Okay. Now, what about 2013? I
I don't
have,
have 2013 with me.
well, you should look at comparative years because it's not one snapshot.
Can I just interject? I understand that you have this question, so given that you have this question, we will take that information and get it all put together for you, rather than tie up the meeting going back and forth through papers at this
All right.
minute.
The other side of the consideration that I took was the fact that there seems to be an accelerated pace in terms of these discussions with Holyoke, and that there's been more consideration and conversations with Holyoke than there has been with people in town.
Bill, that's why we're having this meeting.
I'm sorry?
That's why we're having this meeting.
Yeah, but this meeting was a result of people saying, we have to have a meeting. It wasn't you. It wasn't the select board that said, let's all get together.
Yeah.
Come on.
Can I make a point about the contract? And I just looked at this for about 5 seconds. We're making certain assumptions about saving money, and I can just tell you in 3 minutes reading this contract that the employee hired by Holyoke is not a Southampton-only employee. It says that it shall be shared between Holyoke and Southampton. And then it goes on to say in paragraph 2, towards the end, that the salary for the assistant inspector shall be $51,272, but that's fixed at 35 hours per week, and that they're entitled to, quote, comp time for any overtime thereafter. First of all, comp time's illegal under Chapter 149. So this right here, you would have to compensate them if they worked for more than 35 hours. So there's that $1,000 that we're saving right there. If a person gets called to do extra duties, which is always required in this town, we're blowing through the budget as it is. So I would caution you to have somebody look at this contract. I'd be happy to give you my input outside the meeting.
Is there anyone else that would like to? Yes, sir.
Mark Reed, 166 Brickyard Road. I have a question about the process here. It appears that the Board of Selectmen have the authority to enter into this agreement by signing it. My question is, where do the funds come from? Typically, when you allocate money, you go before town meeting and request money be taken from one account or another. So this, whatever figure it's going to be, $74,000 or $94,000 that we're paying Holyoke, would have to go before town meeting to get funds allocated. What if the town of Southampton votes not to allocate that $94,000 at town meeting, which we've all seen happen before where that doesn't? Then is the town liable for whatever reason to pay them because you entered into a contract with the city of Holyoke? I support everyone's comments. I think this is a bad idea for the town of Southampton. The town of Southampton is a small community. We work together very closely with different boards and committees, and we have a great working relationship, and I think we ought to keep it that way.
Hi, I'm Vicki Morrow, Pomeroy Meadow Road, but I'm also the town accountant here in Southampton. To answer your question, Mark, currently there's $50,000 in the budget line item for the salary for the building inspector, which we voted on at town meeting. And then the various insurances and fringes and whatnot are already included in our budget. So what we would need to do for this first year is we would have to go to town meeting to vote to amend the budget to take the salary line and put it into the expense line, because we cannot pay wages in the salary line for a contract. It needs to actually be an employee of Southampton to pay. So we would have to do that at town meeting to switch those budget line items around in order to have the money for this contract. And that's kind of how that works, so.
I'm Jim LeBrie. I live on 66 Gun Road in Southampton. And I'm a member of the planning board, but I'm going to speak on my behalf as a resident. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but just sitting back and listening to the whole thing going down. And I understand Mr. Lambella made the statement that Holyoke isn't in it to lose any money. So if they can arrange a building department in our town and not lose any money, why can't we do that? Is there something magical they have in Holyoke that they can arrange this? Why can't we arrange the same thing and we govern it ourselves? I just didn't know if anybody looked into that. Maybe it's a matter of raising fees. I don't think they were raising fees. I don't know if it's cutting pay. I'm not sure what they're doing or what magical thing they have. But I think we ought to really look at that. Maybe we can keep it in this town. Maybe we can't keep it within the same budget. I mean, that may make a lot of sense. That's all I got to say.
Bob Burkham, Pleasant Street, obviously a citizen, and also sit on a conservation commission, but I don't know the commission has an opinion about this one way or the other. You mentioned that it is going to create revenue of $20,000. Is that new revenue, or that's just what it already creates?
We would collect 100% of the fees instead of 20% of the fees. So that would be new revenue.
And the other 80% of the fees goes to the inspectors, correct?
Right now, it goes to the inspectors.
Right, to pay their,
Holyoke, it would all come to us.
to pay their salaries.
I don't think they,
So what I'm getting out of this is, we're gonna pay Holyoke $1,200 to do our human resources for us, is what it boils down to. And then we'll have Holyoke inspectors doing our inspections.
For no fees, we keep the fees.
we get 100% of the fees.
That's the 20,
For plumbing and electrical.
Well, we get $20,000 more into the coffers that we wouldn't have. That's the real savings.
How much is it gonna cost to hire that plumbing inspector and electrical?
That's the thing, the way I do the math, it doesn't work out that way. We're paying Holyoke to do our inspections for us. Yes, we get the inspection fee, but we're still paying out to Holyoke for this service.
I mean, I don't know how, I agree with you. They still would have to be billed $40 per inspection, and that's gotta come from somewhere. It's gonna subtract, it had to either come from the inspections that we receive, which they're calling 100%, or we're calling 100%, but it's gonna have to be deducted from that eventually, because there's no other source of money. That's
Right.
And I agree with you on that.
Right. I mean, it's, historically been a revolving fund. The fees come in, a large portion goes back to the inspector, and then some of it goes to the general fund. So instead of it, well, it's going to go through the general fund, but it's going to Holyoke rather than staying in town. And then as Holyoke gets busier, as I believe all municipalities, outside of a few that are shriveling up, going bankrupt and whatnot, they're going to be busier. Their inspection department's going to be busier. It's their inspector, the employee of the city of Holyoke versus Southampton, granted contracted to us, but I find it hard to believe that they're going to put their emphasis in our municipality when, their bosses are in Holyoke. So to me, it doesn't make sense, as well as all of the other comments tonight, as far as services by citizens to fellow citizens. That's huge. I've been, my background in the fire service, I've been in several different fire departments, know people all over the world, really, in the fire service. And the regionalization stuff, it kind of doesn't work, because it gets very impersonal. They show up, there isn't a vested interest to get the job done, and I find it hard to believe that an inspector would be any different. So it certainly should stay in town with their own folks, in my opinion, anyways.
Yes, ma'am?
Sue Ann Fisher, Montgomery Road. I am also the wiring inspector's wife. And I have 3 keynotes. First of all, qualifications. I would be interested to see the qualifications of the individuals that would be doing it, as opposed to our own plumbing and electrical inspectors, because they are highly qualified, and I believe that they would be at least even, if not even better, than what we could have. Secondly, the $1,200 difference. It's not a $1,200 difference, because the inspections, they do not get 100% on the second and third inspections. That's something that was said earlier. And the other thing is, if we had someone in that position, the pension, there would be pension, correct? Pension and benefits for that person?
Correct. That's reflected in the numbers.
Well, both the electrical and plumbing inspector do not get benefits of any kind. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just make a statement too? I don't know if the select board's aware of it or not, but under 780 CMR Commonwealth Math Regulations, the appointing authority that appoints the building commissioner is responsible for the commissioner So Holyoke appoints the building commissioner, our select board has no say or no control over that commissioner. Just to let you know.
So in the proposed contract, the one thing it notes is that the Holyoke, our local inspector would actually be appointed jointly by Damien, who is currently the building commissioner of Holyoke, and also the Board of Selectmen of Southampton. And the whole process of hiring him, all the way through if there was any disciplinary action or anything else, would be done jointly with the Board of Selectmen and Damien, who is currently the building commissioner of Holyoke.
Is that an additional expense over and above zoning enforcement?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Is that an additional expense over and above the building inspector for the zoning enforcement officer?
That's included in the price, the zoning.
Included in the,
Is Damien going to be in charge of the zoning for Southampton?
I don't know who the person is in charge of the zoning for.
So based on the way the contract is written, how it is the local inspector is for Southampton. Local inspector has some limitations because they're only an inspector and they're not a commissioner. So to oversee certain permits and certain things, the building commissioner, AKA Damien, would have oversight of that. As based in the contract, they actually have written in the fact that Damien would plan to actually be here on occasion in the mornings, various during the week, to keep track of things and to make sure that the local inspector had oversight. The local inspector would be in charge of the zoning enforcement to a certain extent, as much as he can be. There are actually hours built into his day to do so. So he would be available in the mornings for several hours here. Then we have an administrative person who would be available, to do the paperwork just as it is currently and has been for a long time. And then after that period of time, the local inspector would actually be out on the road, and they would be doing zoning enforcement. There is one day during the week that they currently have scheduled in where they would have extended period of zoning time to do so. So it's actually penciled in. The nice thing about this is that there's actually oversight by Holyoke, theoretically, so that the local inspector would report directly to Holyoke's building department. So, they'd be accountable to make sure, this is getting done, this isn't getting done. They also have an idea of, where we may be behind in paperwork, where we may be behind in software, and they can get us up to speed to be more efficient. And these are things currently we may not have just because we're a small town, so we'd be tapping into the resources of a larger community.
Mr. LeBrie.
Jim LeBrie, Gun Road. One more thing to think about. Maybe in the past, the selectmen have appointed committees to search for a fire chief, to search for an administrator. Would you consider appointing a handful of 5 or 7 town people to maybe have a committee and look into this situation? Just throwing it out there.
I'm not opposed to another committee, but I do know how hard it is to find people to serve on said committees.
I bet you could find a few tonight.
I think tonight would be an exception.
you could pass the hat and get the 1,200.
You got a chairman right here.
John's got enough to do.
Nice, maybe the indulgence to be heard one more time.
Yes,
and I promise this will be the last time. As I said, I did municipal defense work. I do municipal defense work. I've done it for 25 years, and it's really important. There's something else I just saw in this contract you all have to know. In Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 258, protects this town. We cannot be sued for the failure to have, for the lack of a service, for not having a service, and 258 Section 10 specifically exempts us from liability for failing to provide or to do an inspection correctly. Can't be sued for it, okay? Knock on wood. This contract requires us on Section E to indemnify Holyoke in the event that Holyoke gets sued because of their failure to or proper means of inspecting our stuff. Indemnification means that Holyoke comes here, checks our house, it's wrong, they give us a permit, they get sued, guess what? We're going to pay for that, and we have to indemnify them, which means not only the liability they're exposed to, but their attorney's fees. There goes our protection under Chapter 258, which we were statutorily given. This is a huge, huge problem.
That's a very good. That was very good of you, Lisa, to point out. Thank you. This contract has not yet made it to our attorneys who represent the town. It is simply a draft from the town, or from the city of Holyoke. If the board wishes at its next meeting to move forward, it would then invest the money to have this contract reviewed by town council, but given the fact that we are fiscally strapped in many ways, we do not have excessive legal fees to send this out to council until we're ready and sure that this is a direction that the town wishes to pursue.
We just got this contract tonight, right? Today?
We received the contract, I think it was finally revised yesterday was the last revision, and we had an additional revision that we received tonight. That is before everyone.
So I personally haven't even looked at the contract. Let's say again.
Nilda?
I have attended select board meetings, and I've always asked questions that would at least address or give me confidence that the select board is on board. They understand the problem, they have a solution, and they check with council. How can you have a meeting when you get a draft that some members haven't even read it?
It's a process, Nilda. It's not done yet.
I think
You do this all the time.
This is
Every
a
time
process,
you come,
Nilda.
well,
It's a process.
well,
If no decision has been made.
Didn't Mr. Lumbra say that the CIC grant is due October 10th? Today is what? October 1.
9:30.
September 30th.
Wait a minute, David, please, let me, because this is really, I asked a question at one of the meetings concerning a informational meeting that took place between Holyoke, I think Holyoke attended, Heather attended with PVPC. It was to get information on the CIC grant. I asked Heather why we, as department heads, were not invited to go to that informational meeting. She said no, that meeting was the CIC grant that had nothing to do with this component. Now we hear tonight that this puts us in a good place for applying for CIC grant money. That was withheld. She didn't say that at that meeting. That's wrong.
So just some information. I think there's some confusion because there was a lot of.
Wait a minute, you said that tonight when I asked you.
I think there's some. No, Nilda, I did not. There was. May I? I'd like to answer your questions, Nilda, if I may. So there was a few things going on at the same time. There was a CIC grant informational session held by PVPC in which the state came to talk about the CIC grant. At that time, we were looking at the CIC grant with PVPC, with Holyoke, to look at dispatch services. That's where the CIC came into play. That's where PVPC came into play. Separately, after that was approximately the time in which the meeting here began and things unfolded with regards to looking into this as a prospective idea. At that point, I met with John Lumbra and Damian Cody, who is the building commissioner of Holyoke, in my office to discuss this. We did not discuss CIC funds for this project at that time. This week, Josh contacted us and said, hey, how come you guys haven't thought about using CIC funds? Josh is again from Josh Garcia from PVPC, and we said, what a great idea. We didn't even think about it. I think we had this discussion for the first time yesterday. So unfortunately, there was a lot of confusion going back and forth, and I know, Neil, that you had spoke with Josh as well pertaining to CIC and PVPC on email, because I was in the loop on that. But there was a lot going on at the same time. They're separate things. PVPC has been involved in both of these at this point in time, but they were two separate and distinct issues. The reason everyone wasn't brought into the CIC grant informational meeting, because it was a grant informational meeting at PVPC for town administrators, mayors, and the like to apply for it.
I was told by Mr. Garcia that it was a public meeting.
Okay, then perhaps it was. I wasn't aware it was, and if it was, then the information was publicly made available and you could
It was on their
attend.
website.
then it was publicly and you could have attended. As far as the other information goes, it was a private meeting with John, myself, and Damien. We didn't post the meeting. It was just informational between the three of us to figure out if this was possible.
Well, I'm disagreeing with some of the timing.
Okay, well, I'm sorry that this seems to be confusing.
But I don't have it.
Okay, so,
That's fine, I understand.
is your question answered?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's not, because
Okay.
it's not completely transparent.
Are there any other concerns that we have not heard thus far this evening that you would like to make sure that the Board of Selectmen hears? Mr. Boyle. I would ask that if you're having a side conversation, you please refrain at this time.
I'm having a hard time believing that the posted position when Rich retired, 50,000 or whatever it was at that time, turned into this. This is just unbelievable. I mean, all over Massachusetts, communities like this would have their own building inspectors. There is a few, like Franklin County, a large group that really work well, but most of the towns have a building commissioner that works well with the towns. I just can't understand why we're going over all these legal issues and all this stuff for a $50,000 position. I realized that there was people that applied for this position. There was one voted on to accept the job, never got truly appointed in it. It's just hard to believe that this all got to this. Like I say, being from this community all my life, here we are dealing with a job. Rich did a beautiful job, he retires, and this thing turns into a stinking horror show. So I guess that's all I got to say.
Would anyone on the board like, oh, yes, sir.
Tom Neal, Thomas Circle, also Chairman, Board of Water Commissioners. And just in looking at attachment A that's at the end of the draft, which shows the draft hours and that, just going to point of some of the other people's comments, see the inspector for wires and the gas and plumbing inspector have a total of 4 field hours a week budgeted for on the table here for the draft. And so I guess the question would be, if there's 4 hours a week budgeted for total budget hours for field inspections, if additional inspections past that 4 hours have to occur in the week, is that additional cost?
Is that under gas and electrical?
It's listed under Holyoke Inspector for Wires and Holyoke Plumbing and Gas Inspector. It's the last 2 line items on the...
Is that hours or is that 4 permits on average?
That is our total field hours for inspections.
Well, this is a draft, so.
I know, I'm
it's
just,
It hasn't even, like I said, I haven't even sat down to read it myself. I just got it tonight. And one of the aspects of contracts is that we look at it and say, no, we want this X and Y, goes back to Holyoke, and it's a process, so, thank you for pointing that out.
Well, and it was given the fact that there's some discussion previously about the length of time it took to get inspections in Holyoke, and if we've only got 4 hours a week budgeted for those specific inspections.
I get the point that, the town government is a service agency, servicing the taxpayers. And I get that point. That's why I was asking Mr. Nault his questions regarding his dealings with Holyoke. It's been a great opportunity to hear the concerns from the people that are in the trades and use this business, use the services of the building inspector more frequently than the taxpayers. But I just like to say that one of the problems we have in town is that there's no money. And with Prop 2.5 failing, we're going to have to be more creative on how we provide those services for the townspeople, because there's no money. This is the first foray into something like this, and we actually got a response from a lot of the tradespeople and whatnot, because it affects them directly. But the taxpayers, we haven't really heard from them, the majority of them. Would that be for, saving $20,000 a year so they can change the commuter distance, the bus distance for the kindergartners, and now have to walk 2 miles? There's a lot at play here. It's just not just the building inspector, plumbing inspector, electrical inspector. It's the whole town and trying to make the budget fit for the whole town. With the failure of Prop 2.5, we just have to be more creative. And that's the hard part. It's just trying to figure it out.
Well, and again, it's just in looking at it, it's if, you know, if additional hours of inspection are required, does it cost additional funds, which...
I'm sure it would. We would have to negotiate to make sure we get an efficient amount of hours for the town and not bear any additional costs.
Well, I can answer that once. You're talking about the plumbing inspector and wire inspector.
Specifically plumbing and wiring.
Right, so, no, the revision, the revised one, or the latest one, takes out the field hours, and it's as needed. So if somebody calls for an inspection, it's $40 to do that inspection. Regardless, now, if the fee's $80, you keep 40. If the fee's $30, it's gonna cost you $10, because it's $40 for that one inspection. If they go a week with no inspections, zero cost to the town. They go a week with 20 inspections, then it's $800 to the town.
Thank you.
So Liz had stated this earlier in the evening. Currently, as it's set up, for an inspection, say just we're going to throw up a higher number just so it's easier to catch. If the cost of the inspection is $100, the inspector would take home $80, the town would get $20. The cost of the inspection is $100 and we have Holyoke involved, the inspector is going to get $40 that we're going to be billed for, and the town's going to collect $60.
They got paid for their contract.
So what's happening currently is we're only getting 20%. So if you look at the numbers, currently, here's the kicker. The town's kicking in about $2,000 in revenue each year, and we're paying out about $13,000, anywhere between $8,000 and $13,000 depending on the year for inspection services per inspector. If it was changed the other way, so we were paying $40 per inspection, we would be taking in significantly more money as revenue. Now, people may say, well, what's a couple $1,000s? Well, with every $1,000, I can take a person off of furlough for a year. Because right now, each department, I currently have someone on furlough for the entire year. Every month, they're not coming in one day of the month so that we can save approximately $1,000 in that department. So $5,000 is huge. That means 5 people aren't on furloughs. And at that point, I'd still end up with a profit of about $5,000 more, which we can put towards the town for something else that we're currently deficient in.
Yes, sir.
Gary Costick, 224.
Would you mind going to the microphone?
I've been a plumbing contractor in this town for 20 years, had a great relationship with the inspectors, and I can tell you exactly what's going to happen if this doesn't work, is people are going to pull less permits. You're going to have, you know, if there's not enough attention being paid and it's difficult to get inspections, people aren't going to pull permits, and there goes your money grab. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question.
Well, there's one man, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jason Johnson. I'm a new resident of the town at 5 Gene Circle. I'm actually starting to pull permits for my own house, so that's why I came tonight, because I'm kind of concerned of what's going to happen with that. It might delay my project. But we're talking about a timeline of trying to get this CIC grant or whatever it is, but it's due October 10th, right? What's the timeline look for trying to figure out if we're going to sign this contract? What happens with that CIC grant if we don't get this contract until January 1st? Can we apply for it then? Is it only good for an extended period of time? Like, how does that all work?
So CIC grants are due by October 10th. The awards are done by, I think funding starts in March. I think the awards are determined by February. Funding to start in March and run 10 months out. So if you miss the October 10th window, it's October 10th of next year to apply for the following year.
So if that's the case, like, isn't that how we're going to try to hopefully help pay for doing this contract? In which case, then we're going to have to push out and have a resolution for the next 12 to 13 months anyway, because if we're talking about we don't have money to send this contract to council to get it reviewed ahead of time, how are we going to rush this through in order to get everything else in time for October 10th?
I don't think the CIC grant's meant to.
So essentially, with this contract that we have, it would be sufficient, I believe, enough, John, let me know when you think about this, to have just it in draft form for purposes of applying to CIC. It would not have to be in formalized form. The idea is that when you apply to CIC, they want a shovel-ready project. So if you say, hey, we're about ready to go and we'll definitely be ready to go by February, March, then they'd be more willing to sign on. So the fact that we've already sat down, that we've had agreements, conversations, ideas about this, that we've already put something in writing to say this is really what we're looking at for our picture, I think that's all we would need. So essentially, the idea would be if we wanted to go with this, we would start working on the paperwork, and then the Board of Selectmen and also the City of Holyoke would have to decide next week if they wanted to sign it.
Right, and then just to follow up on that, I think just moving forward, that just moves us one step down the line, but we're still a distance from the goal, and that since the awards are made in February, I mean, it really gives you October, November, December, this is a no-go, pull the application.
Does it cost us money to pull the application? Like, is there an application fee?
It's just the time, the hour or two to fill out the paperwork and submit.
And the contract is currently written, and I mean, we can always revise this, but right now it does have a provision that it allows for notice to withdraw if you give 30 days. So the town of Southampton could withdraw for any reason or no reason whatsoever if we provide 30 days notice to Holyoke and vice versa. So if either community is unhappy with how it's working, what's happening, or say, hey, you know what, after 30 days, this just isn't working for us, they can provide notice to the other community and say, you know what, at the end of this month, we're done. Thank you so much.
So does that mean a contingency plan is already going to be in place in case that happens?
Well, our current contingency plan is already in effect, and we always have someone on essentially call if we need to whenever we're looking for like backup building inspectors. As far as the other two, that one would be a little different, but that would be something we would want to keep in place.
Where does the money come for that?
Well, it just would come out of the same funds as we would pay for the regular agreement. So instead of paying Holyoke for our portion of the contract, we would be paying individuals.
But wouldn't we
So
have
it's
to move
already
that?
budgeted.
Wouldn't we have to rebudget that line as instead of an expense as an
No.
employee of the town?
He's an employee of the town.
Okay.
It wouldn't change at all. If we did decide to go down this direction, eventually we would have to revise how our accounts are structured for next fiscal year. But at this moment in time, we could make it work with what we need to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to follow up to Mark Reed, 166 Brickyard Road, to a comment that Mr. McDougal just made in the fact that the building inspector, the plumbing inspector, and the electrical inspector is a service operation to the town of Southampton. And you mentioned that you haven't heard from the residents of the town of Southampton. So I would propose that a warrant, a town article, be put before town meeting to see if the town of Southampton, the residents of the town of Southampton, would like to investigate entering into an agreement with the city of Holyoke. And then you would have the residents speaking, as well as most of the people that are in this room. And I think that should be done because you're going to hear from a lot more people, because you have the gentleman that was just up here, a new resident to the town of Southampton that is building a house that is concerned with the whole process. And I think it should go before a town meeting.
We're having a special soon, aren't we? Yeah. We need a bigger room. But we're having a meeting Thursday? So the meeting on Thursday this week is to look at articles for the warrant, correct? So is it something we could do?
I'd have to have wording of an article, and it'd have to be vetted by town council before Thursday.
Do it as a straw vote, not by no town council.
Can you do that?
Just a straw vote, yes.
So if it's not on the warrant, Gary, can we still do that? If it's not on there?
You can put it on the warrant Thursday night when you meet to sign the warrant.
But how would you word it?
How would you word it?
That's the question. How would you word it so it was legal?
I'll give you some words.
Gary, you only have 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes, okay? So, I mean, I just don't know how to word it correctly, and as your past experience as moderator, I would ask you to bring that service forward.
I would be happy to do that.
All right.
Thank you.
So maybe you could word something that you could present to us on Thursday that had some legal sense to it, that if we did vote on it, had some binding or non-binding, whichever way the Board of Selectmen would want to go.
My suggestion would be you do it as a non-binding thing. What your intention was to pull more of the voters. Actually, a lot of the people, most of the people who spoke tonight are residents, but they're also more direct stakeholders. They're, in this decision. But I think what I'll do is I'll get something out to you all, including Heather, by email tomorrow.
Okay.
Suggested wording that you basically, a motion for a straw vote, an intention, which will draw out the discussion once the motion is made.
Would Mr. Floyd be okay with that?
I'm sure he would. Because it's not binding.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? 1 second. 1 second. Yes, sir.
I just want to make one more comment towards the question of how come you're not hearing from more residents. And I think that question is because, I think the answer to that question is because most of the people here are the tradesmen doing the work, and most homeowners are not their own subcontractors, so they're not the ones that are reliable or the ones responsible for going to the town and pulling the permits. So they're essentially here acting on the residents' behalf. Because they're the ones that have to deal with the process and making sure that they get the inspections and file out the proper paperwork and talk to the proper people and get the work done. And the residents are the ones that are benefiting from the work that the tradesmen are putting forward. So I think that's one of the biggest things is a lot of the residents won't understand the impact that this is going to have on the town until their contractor starts to tell them that their timelines are being pushed a week or 2 weeks or whatever for the inspection to take place or for that permit to get approved or anything like that. So, I personally know about it just because I've been pulling my own permits for things, right? But I think most residents in the town aren't doing that. So they're here speaking on essentially my behalf for me, and I think that's why you're not hearing from them.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that Mr. Swanson's going to draft something for the special meeting. My question is really putting the board on the spot is, haven't you heard enough tonight that would suggest perhaps this is not a good idea? I have not heard one person support this. I have more questions and concerns than I had before I came here. And, it's the job of this board to vet and to listen to what we've said. And if I was sitting up there, I'd have some serious concerns about moving forward with this. So why are we even going to be asking the residents of Southampton when this is the body right here that is the most intellectual about the process, about the concerns? I think it's great to hear from Southampton, but this is the body that you really need to hear from. And I haven't heard one good word about this proposed process.
So actually, I was just sitting here thinking I was going to ask if anyone out there was in support of this, but then thought probably no one would raise their hand at this point anyway. But I might ask, is there anybody that hasn't spoken tonight that is in support of this? That is in support of this proposed plan?
Well, I'd just like to make one comment. Being up here is not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. Sitting up here with all the angry eyes focused on you, I'm still trying to do what's right for the town. People will come out to vote against something. That's just the fact. So I take that in my evaluation of the issue. The majority of the people came out tonight, gave up their time with their family because they're opposed to something. But there's 6,000 people in town. If you've got the teachers and the students and the parents in the room and say, hey, if we save $20,000, your kid doesn't have to walk 2 miles to kindergarten. I think you could start an argument that say that savings of money, the money has to come in from somewhere to allow us to do that. Laying off teachers, furloughing highway. This is the reality of the town. My job, my own opinion of the job, I've only been doing it since '04, is that I have to look at the things as objective as possible and make hard decisions for what's best for the town, not for the minority. And I'm sorry to say that, and I respect everybody in this room and their opinion, but I still have to step back and say, is this a good deal that saves enough money for the town, for the majority of the town, for the best interest of the majority of the town? And it's not easy to do.
We all want to deal with the reality. The reality here is that we're not going to make money on this. The reality is that we're actually going to lose revenue. Why? Because we will not have the amount of additional taxable assessed valuation that we usually have, because we will lose the local input to tell us on the Board of Assessors to go out and tax these people. A lot of people will be happy that they're not taxed, but that doesn't help our revenue supply. We're going to lose money on this.
I would just like to say that I think, for all intents and purposes right now, we need to take a 5-minute break, not 15. I can't foresee this meeting going much longer. I think most people have spoken, but I would like to get my thoughts in order and take a break for 5 minutes.